All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Abundance Formula podcast. I am so excited today to have transformational life coach, business coach, Cari Rose. This has been a long time coming. I went back to the original podcast I heard you on because I couldn't remember. It was in 2023. I didn't even realize it was that long, which I think
Yes.
is even more cool why this is so aligned. Because for everyone that doesn't know, because I was talking to Cari earlier, I heard her on the Nikki and Bree Show podcast, and I loved her. She's their life coach, and I just loved everything she was talking about. I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to reach out to her to get her on the podcast. And it just slipped my mind. I got busy. I thought about it so many times that year, and then I didn't realize that much time went by. And then she was on their podcast again, and I heard her literally a couple weeks ago, and I was like, okay, it's a sign. I'm going to do it as soon as I get out of my car and just shoot her a message and see if we can coordinate this. So I'm so excited you're on, you guys are in for a real treat. So thank you for being here, Cari.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm actually excited to tell kind of the story too
Yeah.
of saying yes to this and all of that.
Yes.
Yeah,
Love it. Well, go ahead.
so
You
good.
can you can start wherever you'd like. I always have everyone tell a little about themselves, some of their
Yeah,
backstory, how they've arrived at where they are today, and yeah, you can throw that in wherever it fits for you.
beautiful. Yeah. Well, I'll start
Yeah.
with um something that you talked about on one of your episodes not too long ago about your word and your intention for the year.
Oh yeah.
And I really love that episode. It's everything I believe in. And I received my word. This is all part of my path too.
Yeah.
I received my word. I typically I hear
Hmm.
messages come through, from God, from the divine, from my intuition. It's also connected. I hear it, and I received my word for this year towards the end of last year when I was I meditate a lot, and I was asking that question in prayer, in meditation, and I hadn't really gotten the word. It wasn't like on the nose yet. And I'm used to getting words like abundance and alignment and all of that. And then it was just in a moment in the middle of doing something else, I just heard share, share. And I was like, wait, what is that my word? Not abundance, not prosperity, not, well, like you kind of want like magic, something. And it was like, no, just share. And so it was like 2 days later that Nicole asked me to come on their podcast again. And so it was just kind of that alignment happened after I received that word, fully received that word, really understood what it meant. And then from there, there's just been so many synchronicities where even, you reaching out, it was like, say yes, where can you share? Where can you share? And so for me, that means sharing this work, sharing story, sharing as much of that abundance that's coming through me with as many people as I can. So all meant to be. You were part of that synchronicity. So, and yeah, I just love how that flows when you get that
Yes.
North Star.
Yes, yes, totally. Because who knows back if you might have been in a busy season and it wasn't, okay, say yes to the things. It might have been say no to the things. And, so
Yeah.
that just all I think was perfect timing. And as we'll get into later, like your program that you're coming out with at this perfect timing for this podcast to come out. I mean, it's just all just so aligned. And I can't wait for people to hear about it in a
Yes.
minute. Yeah.
It's divine alignment. That's what I call it. It's that divine alignment. And so, yeah, so my story, so I grew up in a really small town in Central California. It's called Tulare, next to a larger town called Visalia. They're all very small towns.
Uh-huh.
And when growing up, it wasn't like everybody was like, we're all going to go, this is what we're going to do after high school. We're going to go to college. It was not about that. It was just, let's see what happens after high school. And I just heard deep in me from a pretty young age, like, no, you're going to go to I heard specifically a
Mm-hmm.
4-year university. That's just what I heard. And it was going to be a private college,
Oh.
religious college of some, like
Mm-hmm.
it was going to be a Christian college. So I just knew that. And so that knowing then led me to go to Pepperdine. And I ended up at Pepperdine, and that's
Oh,
where I
really?
went. Yeah, to college. And that's what brought me to LA. And so, I go from this tiny town to now to Malibu, right? So I end up
Yep.
in Malibu, still in our little bubble of our little world of Pepperdine. But then from there, I heard that deep knowing of you're going to do the international program. And so then I went to London for a year, lived in London for a year and in Paris for a year. And it was all following this alignment that I'm talking about, this voice that's telling me this is what's next, this is what's next, this is what's next, not knowing what how I would do it. Now, I, came from we didn't have much money, so I had to get scholarships, I had to get grants. Had to be so supported in doing those things, and I was. So
Mhm.
by saying yes to the thing, the how worked out. The
Mhm.
getting there all worked out and fell into place. And so I ended up going to college and graduating and going into, the corporate world and doing all the things, for a while there that were like checking off the list. Like, this is what I'm supposed to do now. This is what I should do. Like, kind
Mhm.
of following the shoulds in life. And while I did well at my job, and I was, I guess I was succeeding, I was
Mhm.
successful. Uh, there was something in me that was like, this isn't 100% where I'm supposed to be in the world. This isn't 100% my purpose. And it actually wasn't until I had my first son that I think stepping into motherhood too is just such a rite of passage, that it
Mhm.
was this really loud voice
Mhm.
that said, "This isn't it. This isn't it anymore." And so I really sat back and felt into, what would it be? Like, what would it be if I were living more in my purpose? And I really started to think about, what do I love about what I do now? And it was really the supporting people, both personally and professionally, in whatever they were doing. It was just my gift, no matter who it was, whether it was my boss or
Mhm.
whether they were working for me or whether it was a client. I would always get into the depths with them and into the spirituality and the, what's going on here, and let's problem solve. And it was kind of, I looked back even further, and my mom always said, like, you were a therapist, you came out a therapist, you came out a
Yeah.
coach, because it was like a line, out the door, calling my landline at the time, just like helping people through issues. And so when I realized that, it was this aha moment for me. Everyone else is like, yeah, of course. But for me, it was like, can I actually do that for a career? And this was before the coaching industry is what it is now. This was there. I didn't really know anyone who was life coach at that time.
Mhm.
So I claimed it. I'm going to become a life and business coach. This is what I want to do. And when I followed that, it was a huge leap for me.
Mhm.
And when I followed that again, the how just fell into place. It's that divine alignment, I call it, that where it just everything aligned to fall into place. And it was as if the red carpet rolled out in front of me of, okay, here's your next step, here's your next step. And I just needed to follow the path. And that's how I ended up coaching.
Mhm.
And then from there, the right clients came in, the right people came in. I got a call one day where someone said, "Can you take 10 clients starting next week?"
Oh,
Right at
wow.
the beginning of my career. It was like
Yeah.
that. It was as if magic
Mhm.
was happening. And as we know, it feels like magic, but really it's truly that alignment.
Mhm. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love it. And in those moments where you just don't like, and I know we're going to dive into the order, kind of the order that you think, or what do you think is the order of things? So when people they're wanting to create this abundant life, they're most people, I think, to find that place feel like they're sort of in chaos. Like, again, whether they feel totally
Mhm.
off track or they feel like you, and I relate to this too, where it's like you're doing the right things, you're checking the boxes, but it's almost more dangerous to be comfortable because then you don't have to change things necessarily. So like, but you still just aren't quite there yet. What's first as far as like getting into that alignment so that you can start to see more clearly what the next step is? Where do you start
The
people?
I the Yeah, the very, very first step is getting in touch with that intuition
Hmm.
that we all have, and learning to really hear it when it's a whisper. I refer to it as the whisper or the scream, or also the feather or the brick.
Hmm.
So we can either hear it when it's really soft and really light, like, this isn't the right thing, or it's time to leave, or this is your next step. Like, you really want this thing. There's a desire there. And it's a soft, gentle whisper or a feather just brushing your arm. And we either listen to it then, or we wait and we wait and we wait until it gets louder and louder until it becomes a scream or a brick across our
Mm-hmm.
head, forcing us into the next step. And then it's a lot more abrupt for our lives. But one way or another, it will end up happening. So sometimes it can even happen where our bodies start to get sick because we're doing something day to day that just isn't in full alignment with what our soul came here to do in this life,
Mm-hmm.
for what we were meant for what, what God wants to express through us. And it feels off.
Mm-hmm.
And so that first step is really getting in touch with our intuition. And the intuition inside of us is actually God speaking to us, is spirit, is the divine saying, this is what's next. This
Mm-hmm.
is what's next. And so the first step I always take anyone through is connecting with that intuition or reconnecting with that intuition, because a lot of times we had it at one point, and like we said, the checklists of life or the busyness of life or just the how loud things get, we lose touch with it. We forget how to really hear it and tune into it, and not just hear it but then follow it.
Right. Mm-hmm. Trust it.
Trust it.
Mm-hmm.
Trust it. And sometimes blindly.
Right. How do you get work people through that fear? Because I'm sure, like, again, they okay, most of us wouldn't deny that we hear it, right? Whether it's
Yeah.
soft or it's loud, but like obviously trust comes through doing it and finally seeing that the outcome was actually good as opposed to bad or whatever. But how do you help people work through that fear of trusting
Yeah.
themselves in that voice, that they're hearing it
Yeah.
correctly, that kind of stuff?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when it comes to fear, fear is really most of the time that inner child inside of us that is afraid of getting hurt, afraid of judgment, afraid of not being perfect. There's all those fears that come up. And I hear a lot, feel the fear and do it anyway, which I actually think is one side of it. And I think of it as hold the fear and do it anyway. So when I say that, I mean really listen to that part of you that's tender, that's like, but I'm afraid I'm going to be judged, or I'm afraid somebody won't like what I have to say, or how I look, or it's not going to be perfect in some way. And our work, and this is all nervous system work too, is to really hold space for that part of us that's scared and go, oh, I see you. It's okay. I hear you. You're scared. I totally understand. Right? Even just hearing me say that, you can kind of feel like, oh, I feel better
Mm-hmm.
already. Like I'm
Right.
heard. And when we hold space for that part of us and we hold that part of us gently and then say to that part, like, I hear you, I understand, let ourselves feel it, and then go, and we're going to keep moving. And I've got us. And guess what? No matter what, we're going to be safe because we are held. I've
Mm-hmm.
got you. God's got us.
Mm-hmm.
We are held. No matter what happens, we're going to be okay. So even if everything goes wrong and we fail miserably, we're still going to be okay. And when we get to that place of such deep trust, we're unstoppable.
Mm-hmm.
We're unstoppable. It doesn't mean we're unstoppable without fear, though. It means
Mm-hmm.
we're unstoppable because we know how to hold it
Yes. I
and we
love
know how
that.
to move with it. Yeah.
Right. I love that. And moving with it with grace, like you're saying, instead of just like, oh, I'm going to show this fear. It's like it's a helpful part of the process. If we
Yeah.
didn't have stressors, we would do nothing, like it's part
Yeah.
of it, but the way that you carry it is everything. And the way that you process it is everything. And that was one of my favorite things that I did here when you were talking with Nikki and Bree was that I wish I could have heard as a child was this concept of creating space, like holding space for whatever that negative feeling you're having is. And I loved how you explained, I love if you explain to people how there's the balance of like you just explained the holding part, but then there is like a window, like you said with your nervous system, like you only really need to feel it for so long and then it becomes the
Yes.
thought loop. Tell people about that because I thought that was a really
Yeah.
groundbreaking thing. And how do they then create the discipline to, okay, feel it, hold it, all of that. What do you say? You say heal it, feel it to heal it. I love that. Don't,
Yes.
process
Feel
it,
it to
don't
heal it.
bypass it. That's huge.
Yeah.
And then how do we turn the switch? Tell them about that.
Yes. And so I call this the 90-second rule because there have been neuroscience studies showing that physiologically, when we have a difficult emotion in our system, it takes 90 seconds for our nervous system, our body, to process it as a difficult emotion, as a reaction. And after that, our bodies are done. It's we're calm. We get to a calmer state. It's only when we repeat the thoughts that the feeling then goes on repeat, and that's when the loop starts. So it's like I feel this difficult emotion, which my body's having a reaction of sadness or hurt or whatever that might be. And then the mind starts to think all these thoughts, negative thoughts about what that means. Oh, that means they don't like me. What does that mean about me? No one else is going to like me. Right. So then that thought keeps the 90-second loop
Mhm.
going again and
Mhm.
again and again. And so our work is actually to drop into the feeling in the body as a sensation. And like I said, hold space, name it, and go, where do I feel it in my body? Oh, I feel it in my chest. I feel it in my stomach. I really feel it. And just hold it. Go, okay, it's okay. I got you. And this moment we start breathing into it, holding space for it, whether that's fear or sadness or grief, it starts to move. It starts to feel seen, heard, and free. Freeing than being seen and being heard.
Mhm.
And it just, you start to relax. And, for those of us who have kids, practice this on your children because, oh my goodness, what a difference it makes. I one time he was on a trampoline with a bunch of kids and they all started wrestling a little rough and felt like he got hurt and he kicked someone back, so pulled him off and I'm having this talk with him and it was in that moment I wanted to, my immediate instinct is to go, you can't kick it, you don't do that, and what's going on. But I remembered this work in that moment. I
Yeah.
remembered this work and I saw he was so upset. And so I said, "Oh, follow the emotion, follow the feeling." And I was like, "Oh, you're so frustrated right now. I can see." And where your body really mad? And he's like, "I'm so mad and I got kicked." And it's like, "Oh, you must feel so frustrated. I so hear you." And like that, in a snap, I saw his whole system relax. His whole system just released, like, I feel so heard and seen. And then I went on to say,
Mhm.
what's a different action we can take? But if I would have gone straight to what's a different action we can take, he wouldn't have even been able to hear me.
Mhm.
But I gave him that 90 seconds, that moment of just feeling what he felt and not telling him, "Let's move on to something else. Let's
Mhm.
talk about the right thing to do when you're feeling so frustrated." No, let's
Mhm.
feel the frustration first and let me hear you and see you, and I can understand that no matter what happened, I can understand there's frustration because it's here. We can't deny that it's here. Let's just feel it. And then, you do it in a different way with kids, but then he
Mhm.
felt it and he was free. And then he could tell me what the next step would be. He goes, "Yeah, I should have done this. I should have gotten an adult. I should, like, next time, that's what we'll do." So,
Mhm.
just as an example of how this work not only works within us, it's so important, but it also works with our children and honestly with anyone in our lives because a
Right.
feeling is there, a feeling is there.
Right.
You know, we can argue with it all we want, but it's there. So let our bodies process it, and then we're free, and then watch where the story of the mind wants to continue feeding it. And that's,
Mhm.
these are big steps to really get, but if you start to become aware of, oh, like I actually was able to breathe through it and now my mind just brought me into another loop, you can start to stop the loop.
Mhm. Right. And I think it's so huge, and especially I think from my generation and up, like, and I think luckily these younger generations, like you're saying, whether now it's a thing for coaches. Now it is becoming more of a thing to let it's okay for you to have these kinds of feelings and to
Yeah.
process them. But I know when I was a kid, that was not, like I planned when I would go cry, like, and it needed to be when no one
Yes.
was home. And I would strategize it. Okay, I've got my violin lesson, and then I could get home, and then I'll have maybe 30 minutes. It's just like, but that's how it
Oh,
was, I think, for so many people, is it's like you needed to be tough. And that meant this, that meant don't cry, or, you did that wrong, nip that anger in the bud, sit straight, or all the things. And so instead of people learning to process our feelings properly in that 90 seconds, we just learned, okay, shove it down. Okay, shove it down. And then at some point it bursts, or if it doesn't, then what it does is it bursts out in other places of your life where you don't take any chances because you've learned
yeah.
to fear this failure that you talked about earlier, to not want to trust the voice, because if there was some negative feeling associated with it, we don't want those. We don't want those. So we need to
Yeah.
just stick to the safe things, so then we don't take these risks that create the miracles, and step out to walk on the water ever, because, well, what if we start to
Yeah.
sink? And so I think it's so huge for people to know, like, it's hold that space. And then when you do feel it, I think it reassures as your body to, like, okay, now I can have the clarity to get out of even the loop once you've just allowed yourself to experience it for a minute.
Yeah.
I think that's so
Yeah.
big.
Yeah. We're really reparenting
Right.
ourselves.
We are.
And that's what this work is. It's reparenting because we didn't learn that way. And that's okay. It's not to
Right.
blame anyone. It's what our parents had capacity for. But this is really a process of reparenting that little one that's still there, that tender part that's still there and just needs to be seen and heard. And once your system, our body, mind, spirit gets used to working this way and operating this way, we start to have this deep knowing that no matter what goes right or wrong, I
Mm-hmm.
can move through it.
Mm-hmm.
I have the capacity. I am resourced to move through this.
Mm-hmm.
So I can try anything now. I can
Right.
do anything now because even if I get the worst happens and I get canceled and I get,
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
still got me. I still
Yeah.
got me. It's
Mm-hmm.
okay. And then I can get still. I've got me. I can get still then and listen for what the next divinely guided step is.
Mm-hmm.
What's the next right step? And then I'll know. And then I'll move from there
Mm-hmm.
and repeat and repeat and repeat. Right. So once
Mm-hmm.
we know that, we can start really living more fully and taking more risks, like you said, doing more things, expanding
Mm-hmm.
ourselves in ways. And, you know, when we're on that path, what we usually find is just more and more and more joy.
Right. Right.
All the fears that we had were stories.
Yes.
Were
Mm-hmm.
just stories, and we keep finding more and more and more joy.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I love how, I know we had talked about it together before we were on the podcast, of how, whether it's reprogramming these stories, these things. I love how you frame, you help people get out of this victim mentality, because one of it,
Right.
whether it's from trauma or it's, well, I didn't grow up that way, or I wasn't so right. They're all those victim stories. And I loved how you talked about the triangle, the two different triangles. And I'd love if you'd share with people,
Yeah.
because I think that's a huge thing in people truly opening the door to be able to live an abundant life that's loved, that's fulfilled, that's impactful, um, is they have to find a way to shift their perspective first. Because when you shift your perspective, then everything that happens is either a lesson for your expansion, or it's part of the plan to get you further beyond where you ever thought you could ask or
Right.
imagine. But that's a choice to think that way. And it comes with I think the triangles help, because, like you've always said, getting your awareness is number one. Because once you're aware, you can catch yourself. If you're not
Yeah.
aware of the other options and ways to rephrase things and reframe, then you feel stuck. So I would love if you'd share that part.
Yeah, this is I think, a really powerful framework for zooming out
Hmm.
and going, oh, like if I can view things this way, and then we can do all the deeper work to actually get into the embodiment of it. But these triangles. So the first one that I always map up out for people is, it's called the drama dynamic triangle. And if anyone's, for the listeners, it's great if you have a pen and paper and you can draw this because it's really powerful to draw it. But in that drama dynamic, it's a triangle pointing down, and on that bottom point is the victim. And when we're in this dynamic and we're living in the victim mindset, and now this is, there are real victims. And so I would never be taking somebody through this perspective shift if they were in trauma or going through trauma. But this is about the victim consciousness, the victim mindset, and staying in
Mm-hmm.
that sort of drama cycle. And so that bottom point is the victim. And then whenever when we're in that mindset, there's always a persecutor. So, that top left point is the persecutor. And the persecutor, there's always someone to point the finger at or something to point the finger at for why things aren't working out. Whether it's I don't, they're mean to me, they're not giving me the opportunities I want, they're not loving me the way I want to be loved, they're this, I don't have enough money, like whatever it is, there we can point to something that's to blame. And in this dynamic, there's always a rescuer as well. So in the victim mentality, not only do we have something to blame or someone to blame, we always are looking to be saved, to be rescued. And sometimes, a lot of us as women play the part of the rescuer a lot in our lives, where we're like, I can fix it, I can go in and I can help this person or save this person, and let me just get in there and work it all out. And
Yeah.
so it's really a common one for us. And what we find in this triangle, though, it's the drama dynamic, is we will continually switch roles. So when we're stuck in it, even if we're always the rescuer, we will eventually become the victim at some point, because it's just the dynamic that plays out, because no one's giving the other person responsibility for their own lives, and in some way we're not taking it either. So if we play the rescuer a lot, we'll usually get really drained,
Mm-hmm.
and will usually be feeding into something or someone who isn't changing on their own. And it can get really frustrating. So suddenly we become the victim going, well, they're never changing. I help them and I help them and I help them and I give them advice. I tell them everything to do. I spend so much time and they don't change. They just keep doing the same. So all of a sudden we're the victim. You see how that
Yeah.
quickly can happen. And so the answer to that, and this I actually originally learned in this book called The Empowerment Dynamic, which I really love, and I've modified it a bit. So we move into what is called the empowerment dynamic, and that's a triangle facing up. And when we move into this dynamic, we go from being victim to being the opposite of victim. And many times when I ask people, what's the opposite of victim? They'll say hero.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because that just goes right back into rescuer,
Mm-hmm.
right? If we think about it, but the opposite of victim is actually creator.
Mm-hmm.
So it's I am the creator of my life, and I actually like to call this co-creator, because I do always believe we are moving
Mm-hmm.
with a higher energy, a higher
Mm-hmm.
power, um, and we're always co-creating. But at the top of that triangle is being the creator of your life and taking responsibility. And when we are in this mindset, we move from having someone to blame and pointing to someone as a persecutor all the time. And I actually call that, instead of a persecutor, I call that our teacher, like some of our greatest teachers. I also call it, have you ever heard of AFGO?
Mm-mm. No.
It's another effing growth opportunity.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever mood you're in that day. You would be
Yeah.
like,
The F could be for the F
yeah,
word, or it could be
yeah,
for fun. It's another
yeah,
fun growth opportunity or not so fun, but it's a
yeah.
growth opportunity nonetheless, right?
Yeah.
So that, instead of a persecutor, it's, what is this teaching me? What
Mm-hmm.
is this showing me? Where am I not taking responsibility for something I don't like?
Mm-hmm.
And what is it showing me? It's directional. It's showing you the way. And it's showing you you're not saying no somewhere. You're not having strong enough bound, or showing you something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when we're in this dynamic, we're not looking to be saved. So instead of the rescuer, that's replace they call it in the book, he calls it a coach, which I love because I'm a coach.
Yeah.
But I call it your entire support system. Your
Mm-hmm.
entire support system. And instead of asking how can I be saved, you're asking how can I be supported? How
Mm-hmm.
can I be supported as I create something new for myself, as I create something different for my life?
Mm-hmm.
And when we're in that place, and if we're used to playing the rescuer, let's just if we're switching roles from rescuer, how that would look with people in our lives that we're in that drama dynamic with is instead of going, how can I get in and save you and solve your problems? It would be, what do you want to change and how can I support you in doing that? Because I know you can do it. I
Right.
believe you can do this 100%. So it's just it's a slight shift, but you can
Mm-hmm.
see what a big, powerful difference that can make.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. I love how every part of that new triangle is all a different form of empowerment. Whoever's in that corner, and even for the creator and seeing what those, the lessons to be learned or the thing that's challenging you. It's just interesting when you've decided to embody the creator mindset, like thinking from that vantage point, then immediately instinctually it's like when the opposition comes, at least my thought is like if I'm functioning from creator, then I first thought is what can I do with this? What can I do with these
Mm,
these materials that have now come into play
yeah,
now? You're thinking, what can I create from this? So especially if it wasn't something that you caused, again, you're still not shifting back to the victim. You're like, all right, I'm creative. I'm a creator. What are we going to do with this, Lord?
yeah,
What do you
yeah.
want me to do with this? Like, what masterpiece are we going to make this
What are you
become?
doing? Yes.
Where do I weave this thread? How does this tapestry look? I don't really know, but like you just tell me what to do with it or just start playing with, it just kind of is a whole different empowering vantage point than the other. And I thought that's just so
Yes.
cool.
Yes, and at the root of it, it's in the victim mindset and the drama dynamic. We are operating from life is happening to me. And I really don't have much agency over it. And when we move into that empowerment dynamic, we move into that creator dynamic. We are operating from life is happening for me. Life is happening by me.
Hmm.
Now, how can I move with that energy? So
Hmm.
everything is for me. How is this showing up for me? Why is this showing up for me? What's the lesson? What am I here to learn? What am I here to learn in this? There's always something. God, what are you showing me?
Hmm.
I'm open. And we'll get it. And if we don't get it on the first time, it'll keep coming back in
Hmm.
different forms,
Hmm.
in
Yeah.
different circumstances, in different situations, and different people until we get it. Because
Right.
like I say, I like to say we're here on earth school,
Yeah.
just learning what we came here to learn, and we'll have to repeat the lesson if we don't get it
Right. Yes.
until yeah, then it becomes the break.
Yes. Oh, and I was curious too. So obviously, like you said, it is a different approach for helping people's mindset who have truly been through a trauma. And I know you know how to work with from that vantage point too. What's the different approach for that so they can still break through to that other side of
Yeah,
becoming the creator of their lives, taking back their power that maybe they feel they lost or they're too broken to have again? What does
yeah,
it look like for that side of things?
yeah, yeah. And I had childhood trauma myself, and I've walked this path. I have walked this path, and obviously, like I said, there are victims where things are happening more currently that need to be addressed as trauma. That's very
Hmm.
different than this. However, when we have some sort of trauma in our past, I always look at it as it wasn't your fault. However, healing it is our responsibility. Healing it is what this process is about for us. There's a reason that this was put in our path for some reason to heal, to heal ourselves. And so when we start to look at it as less of, oh, this happened to me and I'm broken forever, it's actually this happened to you and it's pointing you to deeper healing. It's
Hmm.
pointing you to something. And it was through a lot of the work that I did on my own from a pretty young age that I was able to then help so many other people. It became my mission. My healing became my mission without me even actually consciously knowing that, even
Hmm.
realizing it. It just happened so organically. And anyone that has experienced trauma and gone through this deep healing will know that just by sometimes even sharing their story, it will heal someone. And so knowing that again as a concept is really important. And then diving deeper into this work of realizing nothing about you is broken. We can't, we're not broken. We are so whole, and we can access that wholeness, that connection to God, to our truth, to that essence of who we are at any time. It's just a lot of stuff has gotten in the way. And we've got to our work is to figure out how do we remove the clutter to access what's already here, because
Mm-hmm.
it's always been there. It's always been there, but sometimes we're just thinking it's outside of ourselves, or we just don't have it. We must
Mm-hmm.
not have it. So, that I would say is the entry point in, and then there's, a deep, deep healing that can come from that. But if you start there and start opening up and asking God, asking the divine, what's that next step for my healing to really help me return home,
Mm-hmm.
remember the truth of who I am, it will start coming to you. It
Mm-hmm.
will The right people, the right opportunities will start coming into your path so quickly
Right.
if we open to that.
Yeah. And I think even with that empowerment, I forget what you call it, the good triangle, the was it the empowerment, what'd you call
Yeah.
that one again? It
The
wasn't
empowerment
okay.
dynamic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think that one's even good when you're coming from that side in the sense of how you see again, not the other point of being a rescuer, but like the support. And I think it's helpful if you've heard this and you're someone that's healing from that standpoint, it gives direction to help because sometimes I know it's hard to know how people like that they're trying to help, but they don't know what that looks like, especially they've not experienced what you have. So they don't, so you know that they're supposed to be a supporter, not a rescuer. So
Yeah.
even offer like, here's how you could support me if, or and then people listening that are a supporter for someone else know that's your role. And you already phrased so beautifully, like you're not trying to fix things. Hey, I'm here and I'll support you in whatever way is helpful, whatever way is helpful.
Yeah. And
Like,
what do you want to create? What do you want to
yeah.
change? What do
Hmm.
you want to be different? And and I'm on your team.
Right.
I'm on your team, and I will support you in that. And I 100% believe you will and can do this. Like
Hmm.
there is nothing more powerful than that. Whether that's someone in your life that's a friend or family or a coach or someone you're going to seek support from,
Hmm.
having that voice of I 100% know you can do this
Hmm.
is huge. We all need each other.
Hmm.
This work isn't meant to do, by ourselves in a corner.
Yes, exactly.
We can, we can,
Mhm.
but it's much faster and much more fulfilling when we have support, when we have a team around us. We're meant to connect with each other in those ways.
Mhm. Well, and I know all this kind of leads into, and I thought you explained it so well, this concept of, okay, we've gotten our mindset right. We're learning how to perspective shift. One last thing, actually, while we're on sort of this whole concept of perspective shifting, I also love how you point out it's important how we say things to ourselves. Like the way we're saying it is
Mhm.
either in the form of
Mhm.
supporting that creator vision or taking you back to the other triangle. I know you've given the example of like your son trying to do better in math. But give us some of those
Yes.
phrases because people don't think they're so simple. They seem simple, but they're can be very more damaging than we realize, and they're good for us to start
Yes.
telling when those pop in our head so we can flip them over somehow.
Yeah, yeah. It's these are big, and these are just the slightest shifts. So going from, for the example of my son of I'm bad at math to I'm learning how to be good at math.
Hmm.
Just that, right? We watched his entire energy and his entire uh, path change because he stopped saying I'm bad at math and he started saying I'm learning how to get better at math. I'm learning how to be good at math, and he believed it. It's like
Hmm.
immediate that one those words can be an entry point for an immediate
Yeah.
shift. It's like an upgrade, a system upgrade.
Hmm.
And this one's actually an interesting one that I like to share because it's not that like immediate like positivity, but it's actually immediate responsibility where that's a really helpful tool for moving to victim into creator, where you put I'm choosing before every complaint you have in your life.
Hmm.
These
Hmm.
words I'm choosing. This is important part of this language shift too, where if you find yourself complaining a lot about I don't like my house, I don't like where whatever it might be, to start putting I'm choosing in front of it. Like I'm choosing every single day to be in a place and not look for ways to move, or to be in a, if you're complaining about your job,
Mm-hmm.
I'm choosing every single day to go into this job and to be in this environment that doesn't feel good to me. And when we start doing that, we start to look at what are my choices and what am
Mm-hmm.
I choosing? And we start to take ownership of, you know what? It doesn't mean, oh, quit your job because some people, can't, and it's
Right.
not a possibility right now, but it means hold it differently. I'm choosing this because right now it is worth it for what it supports me in. So I'm going to look at it differently
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to stop resisting it so much and hating it so much. And I'm going to go, what are my growth opportunities here? How can I
Mm-hmm.
learn through this? How can I oh, like I'm in this environment that I don't like. How can I learn to set boundaries even in this terrible environment? How can I learn to use my voice? And so you just start to view everything differently when we start to realize I'm choosing. I'm choosing. But yes, how we speak to
Mm-hmm.
ourselves um that's a really big shift. The one you talked about is I'm terrible at this or
Mm-hmm.
versus I'm learning to do
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
So,
And I
yeah.
think that's such a
And
great
even with
entry word because sometimes if you go too polar opposite, like I'm good at math, well, that's your brain won't, it's not necessarily true yet.
yeah,
So you can't
yes.
throw something that your brain won't believe because belief is everything. And so if you say I'm learning, that's true. You are in the process of learning. And so that doesn't mean you won't be a genius at it. You honestly could. Like, so what is that wonderful quote? It's like, yeah, doubt kills more dreams than failure ever has, something like that. And it's
Yes.
like, so don't do that. It could be the exact thing you're called to, but you got to be a student at some point. So just instead of saying the polar, I'm so bad, I'm learning is such a great entry. That's something your brain can believe it is true. And then you have the opportunity to get to the place you're meant to go.
Yes, and what you're saying is so spot on because we have to believe at least 50% that
Hmm.
what we're saying is true in order
Uh-huh.
for our systems to actually get on board with it and to go,
Yeah.
"Ah, yeah, that feels right." And so sometimes affirmations,
Hmm.
can almost do the opposite because they feel so far away. They're just words we're saying, but there's no resonance.
Hmm.
There's no match in our system for it because
Yeah.
we know it's not true. And
Yeah.
so, like you said, once we are on board with it, we can believe I'm learning. I'm
Hmm.
learning. I'm
Yeah.
getting there. I'm moving toward.
Yeah.
And we can even say it. I'm excited to be better at
Hmm.
math. I'm excited to be
Yeah.
better at going on stage. I'm excited to get better at public speaking. Whatever that thing is, there's language we can use where we actually can believe that. And then
Yes.
and then the energy of those words are motivating and pull us
Hmm.
closer
Hmm.
to that thing already.
Yeah. And I know you've got so much training about like those technical things. I was curious if you could tell, because I know some people that listen to it and it all sounds good. And I love how you've already given so many tacticals because I think some people think this is such a big concept of like
Mhm.
abundance and vibration and frequency and, law of attraction. All this stuff is so big.
Yeah.
But when they do, break it down to if we were in school learning science, which they should teach these things in school because they are real, even on
Before
a
before
scientific
we
level. Yeah,
yes.
because then it makes sense. And so I was wondering if you could kind of explain a little bit about how these things like vibration or being in tune. I don't know a lot about the human design, but whatever you think from your training is relevant to help people on a newbie level to start understanding this stuff is a real thing that you can very much, like you've said before, feel peace at any point, getting regrounded into the present or whatever those things are, how it really is working. And it's not just sort of
Mm,
in thin air.
yeah. Yeah, I think, you know, it again, it's scientifically proven like attracts like. So when we are a vibrational match for something, it feels like just such a natural attraction
Hmm.
to each other, right? So whether it's and we can start to play with this with the smallest of things. So it could be, well, I know I could go to that store and walk in and buy a top that I want, but I couldn't go to that store and walk in. But that vibrational match you feel for I could walk into this store and buy a top. Like you're a match for that. And so start to play with that energy and go, okay, like how does it feel to be a match for something to know like I can have that thing or,
Hmm.
it's like we start to say we wanna manifest a house the same way you would manifest a dime.
Uh-huh.
right? And so starting to play with expanding that energy and going, "Ooh, what would like how natural is it to walk into this store?" That's how natural it can be to go into the one you think is so inaccessible, and then start to expand that capacity for that, what I call that alignment, that
Mm-hmm.
match, that frequency match. But this energy, you know, it builds over time. So we really, all of this work, it's the nervous system work at the root of it, and then it's the spiritual alignment. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what I like to go both ways. Like you said, that groundedness of really knowing how to regulate ourselves and our system and come back home within our bodies, and then knowing how to hear that voice and connect with spirit creates an energy within us that is magnetic,
Mm-hmm.
magnetic, and almost irresistible for anything we want. And I think anyone can probably look around and see examples of that, of someone in their lives that's like just living in that joy, in that fun, in that expansion, and things just keep coming, opportunities keep coming, and uh, people come into their lives as if by magic. They meet someone, they get something, like the opportunities are coming, versus maybe somebody that's more in that victim mindset, and it feels like there's resistance, and then they get deeper into it. So watching for that and noticing there's a difference in the energy. There's a difference in how they're operating within themselves, how they're speaking to themselves, what they
Mm-hmm.
believe is actually possible. There's a huge difference between those two.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that answers your
No, yeah, I
question,
think
but
I think
yeah.
that's great. And I think one of the favorite parts that I hear through that for people to take note of is you said it gets stronger and stronger, it starts to establish itself more and more. And I think that's cool because it made me think of how you told the story. I was like, did you ever feel imposter syndrome as you started? Now you're this life coach
Oh
for
yeah.
these big celebrities and these people. Did you ever think, okay, you find when you got in the first, I don't know whoever was your first, but you get in this room with these big people that have millions of followers and influence, and you're like, do I have enough to help these people? But I loved what your response is. Tell me what your response was to that, because it's exactly what we were just talking about here, of being in that matched vibration to where you were landing at that
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, and this is part of like knowing when we hear that voice,
Mm-hmm.
when we not hear it, just hear it, when we can tune into it, listen to it,
Mm-hmm.
and follow it. So for me in my path, it was like, this is your medicine for people.
Mm-hmm.
This is your medicine for people. I know that whoever's in front of me, it doesn't matter how big of a star they are, or how big of an athlete, or how big of an influencer, how big or small they are,
Mm-hmm.
in
Yeah.
the world. I know what my medicine can be for them and whatever they're
Mm-hmm.
going through, because I heard that voice. I listened to that voice. I followed that path, and it became clearer and clearer and clearer every step. So when, yeah, the time came where these, you know, these big
Mm-hmm.
name clients are coming to me, or I have celebrity clients coming to me, it was, it felt natural. It just felt like I can't wait to get in there. I'm
Mm-hmm.
so excited, instead of, "Oh my gosh, can I do it?" It was just,
Mm-hmm.
I'm so excited to get in there and help them in this way that I know it is my medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so important. It felt just like a natural next step. It didn't
Mm-hmm.
feel so big. But if you would have told me that maybe when I was working the corporate world
Yeah.
and said, actually, tomorrow I'm going to have this person call you so you can help them through, it would have felt
Yeah.
like, wait, 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 I'm not prepared. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm not there yet. But it just felt like a really natural next step. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's what starts to happen in this work. And it doesn't mean, in that case, I wasn't scared. There was no
Right.
fear. It doesn't mean everything is without fear. Again, like that fear will sometimes come up. It's recognizing when that fear is that younger self saying, "Oh,
Right.
you're going to get hurt," and
Uh-huh.
then holding it. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And I think it just should give people hope that, like, that's also part of why we have to go through the journey up the mountain, is
Yeah.
because you've now walked the path and all the problem solving and all the skill sets and all the things you had to learn and all the stuff to get to that point. It bridged that gap from, okay, you're over here and they're like, hey, walk in that room and tell the celebrities how to live their life better. You'd be like, wait, you've not had a journey towards it yet. And so it's
Yeah.
like, we want to skip the journey. And that's one of my favorite things to try to help people with as far as abundance. You could be in the abundant place, and or one of the best phrasings of it is like if you went to bed not a multimillionaire, but you wanted to be, and you woke up the next day and were, it would actually be a curse, not a blessing, because you wouldn't have put in all the work to know what it even meant, what kind of responsibilities, how you manage them, how you juggled them, how to delegate. Like there's so much it takes to get to that place so that it's actually a blessing. And if you skip
Yeah.
it, the abundance isn't abundant. So we just have to tap into the way, to go back to my word of the year, to enjoy all parts of the process, the rough ones when you're like, oh, this is my teacher and
Yeah.
I'm not happy about it, but we're going to do it. And then the ones that do feel good. And so I think that's just another little testament to the process you went through, this whole process of learning all these things and having these experiences. So by the time you were in those rooms, you were the right vessel to give that medicine
Yes.
over.
Yes. Yes. And I love that you use the word vessel. And that's really, there's another level to this framework, my divine alignment framework, I call it, after the creator triangle, which is actually moving into more channel consciousness of I am simply a vessel
Mm-hmm.
for what God wants to express through me. And how can I step more and more and more into that and take care of the vessel and feed the vessel, whether that's with experiences, learning, staying in a certain perspective, holding myself, doing this work, honoring what's here in my body and honoring my feelings, whatever that means. How can I take care of the vessel so that I can just be open to what wants to move through me, to that divine energy that wants to flow through me to the world? And so the more and more and more we can connect with that and move into, we are here. We each have, a unique way that God wants to express through us. And how can you open more fully to that and take care of the vessel so that you can be that in the world? If we're all operating that place, it's a whole new world.
I love that. Well, so tell everyone about your amazing program that's coming up, Holy Shift, because that's where
Yeah.
obviously we've just given snippets of what I know you're going to break down for people in this amazing
Yeah.
program. So tell them about it, who it's a match for, and all that good stuff.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. So it's holy shift. That's with a WH. So it's a
Hmm.
whole shift into wholeness, but it's really this divine alignment framework that I'm talking about. It's a coming together of all of my powerful tools that I've helped so many people with along throughout the years, learning how to not only have the framework of them in our minds and the concepts of them, but how to live these and breathe these tools until it becomes integrated into your entire operating system. So it's a complete upgrade in our operating system and moving into that creator consciousness, that co-creator consciousness, that channel consciousness, where you are feeling so healed, so abundant, so aligned with what your soul came here to do, that you really feel unstoppable. And so it really is helping people heal and step more and more and more into purpose and meaning. And so this is, for women, and I really do a lot of work around the feminine energy and how we can actually work more and more with that as we create, because we are here to create, but there's ways that we can actually tune and tap in more into our feminine to create with a lot more ease and a lot more grace and a lot more, like I said, alignment, where it almost feels just like, oh, this is just a natural next step. So we have fun. There's a lot of embodiment practices too, between breath work and movement and different things that I bring in, and then I teach this divine alignment framework of how do we move
Hmm.
into channel consciousness and how do we actually be it every day,
Hmm.
so that by the end of this program we're in it, we're doing it already.
Hmm.
And it's like, and then you're off to the races.
Yes.
So it's 4 months, and it's starting mid-February. So and I'm going to offer a special discount code for your
Oh,
audience
awesome. Thank
only. I
you.
know. So I will, so I'll send all that to you so we can
Okay,
share
great.
with
Yeah.
everyone. But yeah, you guys will get a special discount code just for this audience. So
Oh, well, thank you
yeah,
so
yeah,
much. I appreciate it.
yeah.
And tell everyone where they can find you, follow you, and get in touch with you.
Yeah, so my Instagram is the Cari Rose. So it's spelled Cari. And so the Cari Rose on Instagram, and then carirose.com is my website. You can find my offerings there, and you can find more information about Holy Shift there. And again, it's Cari.
Wonderful. And I'll have all that in the show notes as well. And when I'm sharing everything on Instagram, direct links and all that as well. So, to our final question, what does
Yeah.
living an abundant life mean to you? And if someone were to ask you how they could start to build abundant life for themselves, what would you tell them?
Mm, I, it, I know I've said this a lot, but it's that divine alignment. It is that deep alignment with your soul's truth, with yourself, and with the divine, with what God is here to express through you. That will bring everything you ever think or thought you wanted or didn't even know you want when we are in that alignment. It's the sensation, it's the feeling that you cannot even explain when we get into that place of full alignment with that, with source. And it's beyond almost material things, but those material things will typically, if that's truly what we desire and what we're meant for, will naturally come as a result to living in this alignment, to
Hmm.
really being lined up. Like I say, when we're lined up, everything else lines up.
Hmm.
And so that connection with self, with our source, with God, and then outside of that, that connection outside of us as well,
Hmm.
that connection with people, but realizing that home is actually within us. It's always accessible. We are already whole. That is living the most abundant life we can possibly live.